The Chamber of Deputies is a federal legislative body and the lower house of the National Congress of Brazil. The chamber comprises 513 deputies, who are elected by proportional representation to serve 4-year terms. The current president of the chamber is Rodrigo Maia, who was elected in July 14, 2016 to serve for the remainder of the 2015-2016 term. Legislatures. The legislatures accounted from the first meeting of the Chamber of Deputies and of the Senate on 6 May 1826. In the imperial era, the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate were created by Brazil's first constitution, the Constitution of the Empire of Brazil, adopted in 1824. The numbering of the legislatures is continuous and counts all bicameral legislatures elected since the adoption of the 1924 Constitution, including the Imperial General Assembly and the Republican National Congress, the previous Constituent and Legislative Assembly of the Empire of Brazil. A unicameral National Assembly convened in 1823 and dissolved by Emperor Pedro I before the Constitution was adopted, is not counted. The inauguration of a new composition of Chamber of Deputies for a 4-year term of office marks the start of a new legislature. In the imperial era, the national legislature was named General Assembly. It was made up of the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate. Senators were elected for life and the Senate was a permanent institution, whereas the Chamber of Deputies, unless dissolved earlier, was elected every 4 years. When Brazil became a republic and a federal state, the model of a bicameral legislature was retained at the federal level, but the parliament was renamed National Congress. The National Congress is made up of the Chamber of Deputies and the Federal Senate. Both houses have fixed terms and cannot be dissolved earlier. Under Brazil's present constitution, adopted in 1988, senators are elected to 8-year terms and deputies are elected every 4 years. Each Brazilian state is represented in the Senate by 3 senators. Elections to the Senate are held every 4 years, with either a third or 2/3 of the seats up for election. The number of deputies elected is proportional to the size of the population of the respective state. However, no delegation can be made up of less than 8 or more than 70 seats. Thus, the least populous state elects 8 federal deputies and the most populous elects 70. These restrictions favor the smaller states at the expense of the more populous states, and so the size of the delegations is not exactly proportional to population. Elections to the Chamber of Deputies are held every 4 years, with all seats up for election. Empire of Brazil: First Legislature, Second Legislature, Third Legislature, Fourth Legislature, Fifth Legislature, Sixth Legislature, Seventh Legislature, Eighth Legislature, Ninth Legislature, 10th Legislature, 11th Legislature, 12th Legislature, 13th Legislature, 14th Legislature, 15th Legislature, 16th Legislature, 17th Legislature, 18th Legislature, 19th Legislature, 20th Legislature, dissolved by the 15th of November 1889 military coup that proclaimed Brazil a republic. 21st Legislature had already been elected to succeed the 20th Legislature, but was not installed due to the proclamation of the Republic. New elections were summoned by the Provisional Government of the Republic in 1890. Old Republic 21st Legislature discharged the role of Constituent Congress, the act that summoned the elections for the Constituent Congress and that empowered it to draft a constitution already established that the Congress would be made up of 2 houses, an elected Senate with equal representation for the Brazilian states, and a Chamber of Deputies, each state having a number of deputies proportional to the size of its population. During the drafting of the Constitution, the Congress was to meet in joint session. The Congress was required to adopt a constitution that conformed to the Republican form of government, and that preserved the recently declared federal model of the state. 22nd Legislature, 23rd Legislature, 24th Legislature, 25th Legislature, 26th Legislature, 27th Legislature, 28th Legislature, 29th Legislature, 30th Legislature, 31st Legislature, 32nd Legislature, 33rd Legislature, 34th Legislature, 35th Legislature, dissolved by the Provisional Government after the 1930 Revolution. Vargas era 36th Legislature, discharged the role of Constituent Assembly. 37th Legislature, dissolved by the Estado Novo coup d'etat. Legislatures elected under the Republic of 46th 38th Legislature, discharged the role of National Constituent Assembly. 39th Legislature, 40th Legislature, 41st Legislature, 42nd Legislature, already under the military regime instituted by the 1964 military coup. The legislature discharged the role of Constituent Congress under a decree of the military government that commissioned the drafting of a new constitution. The constitution was voted under duress. Legislatures elected under the military regime: 43rd Legislature, 44th Legislature, 45th Legislature, 46th Legislature, 47th Legislature. The Chamber of Deputies was elected under the process of gradual return to democracy. During that legislature, the last military president handed over power to the first civilian administration, still elected indirectly, by means of an electoral college. The 1985 electoral college, however, was placed under no duress, and elected the opposition candidates for president and vice president. After the inauguration of the civilian administration, the 47th Legislature passed a constitutional amendment empowering the next legislature, that would convene in February 1987 after the 1986 legislative elections, to discharge the role of National Constituent Assembly, empowered to adopt a new constitution to replace the one inherited from the military regime. Legislatures elected after the restoration of civilian government: 48th Legislature, discharged the role of National Constituent Assembly. 49th Legislature, 50th Legislature, 51st Legislature, 52nd Legislature, 53rd Legislature, 54th Legislature, 55th Legislature. Federal representation. The number of seats per state is distributed according to the number of inhabitants per state, according to the official measurement taken by the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics through a census held each 10 years. The Brazilian population is represented by one deputy for each 362,013 inhabitants on average, but this proportionality is limited by having a minimum of 8 members and a maximum of 70 members per state, these criteria being subject to an apportionment paradox. Therefore, states with 3,258,117 inhabitants upwards have 9 to 70 deputies. Following this scenario, for example, the city of São Paulo with its 11,253,503 inhabitants is represented by 31 deputies of the total members of the state, and the rest of the state with its 28,600,000 670,588 inhabitants are represented by 39 MPs. There is a distorted representation of the Brazilian states in Congress, having some groups of deputies representing on average more than the proportion of the population of the state, and others representing less. The proportionality means that Roraima is represented by a representative for every 51,000 inhabitants, and, at the other extreme, São Paulo is represented by one representative for every 585,000 inhabitants. This difference is reflected in the representation of the states in the Brazilian Congress, with deputations for states as Roraima with 681% of the population represented by the deputies in the Congress, and less proportionality for the population of the state of São Paulo with 63% of the population represented by the deputies in the Congress, where proportionality is the percentage of representatives in the chamber divided by the percentage of the population. The population of the state of São Paulo, because of the maximum limits of 70 MPs for any one state, give up having 40 more seats in Congress compared to the other states' bodies. The House of Representatives is composed of the Bureau of the Chamber of Deputies of Brazil by college leaders in the Chamber of Deputies of Brazil, and the commissions, which can be permanent, temporary or special inquiry. Bureau of the Chamber of Deputies of Brazil. The current composition of the Board of the Chamber of Deputies is the following: President Rodrigo Maia, First Vice President Waldir Maranhão, Second Vice President Fernando Jacobo, First Secretary Beto Mansa, Second Secretary Felipe Bornia, 3TD Secretary Mara Gabrieli, Fourth Secretary Alex Canziani, 1 degree Alternate Registrar Luis Enrique Mandetta, 2 degrees Alternate Registrar Gilberto Nascimento, 3rd Alternate Registrar Luisa Erindina, 4 degrees Alternate Registrar Ricardo Izar. Standing Committees. On March 6, 2012 was defined division of committees between parties. The President's House, Marco Maia, believes that the proportionality between the parties' blocs must take into account the data of the last election. Thus, PT and PMDB, with the highest benches, were 3 committees. Dem and PSDB, the 2 largest opposition, were 2 commissions each. On the other hand, PSD, most harmed by this decision, filed a lawsuit in the Supreme Court trying to reverse this decision. The chair of the committee was defined as follows: